Jack pushed open the cabin door and stepped onto the porch, the chill of the morning air biting his skin. He expected silence, maybe the rustle of squirrels, but instead he froze. Just a few feet away, on the rough wooden boards, lay a small lynx cub. Its sides heaved with shallow breaths, fur damp and clumped, eyes half closed. Next to it sat the mother, her head lowered, a guttural sound leaving her throat. It wasn't a growl. It was something closer to a cry. Jack's first instinct was to back away. His heart hammered. The cat's ears twitched toward him, but she didn't move, didn't bare her teeth. She stayed, her body curved protectively around the cub. He whispered to himself, steadying his shaking hands. This wasn't just a chance encounter. She had brought the cub here. He slipped back inside, grabbed his phone, and dialed the number he had pinned on the fridge months ago after a neighbor mentioned it, the local wildlife rehabilitation center. The line clicked and a calm woman's voice answered. Emily Reed. He stumbled through the words. Lynx, cub, porch, breathing weak. Emily's tone stayed even. Don't feed. Don't touch barehanded. Keep distance. Make a warm, safe space and wait for us. Jack shoved a folded blanket into a cardboard box, slid in 2 water bottles filled with hot tap water, and wrapped in old socks. He pulled on his work gloves, then stepped back onto the porch. The mother lynx lifted her head, her golden eyes locking onto him. Jack's breath caught, but she didn't move. Slowly, carefully, he set the box down on the far side of the porch. He retreated, palms open, showing he meant no harm. The cub barely stirred. Its tiny claws flexed against the boards, then stilled. Jack crouched at the doorway, torn between rushing forward and freezing in place. Minutes dragged until the distant crunch of tires on gravel cut through the forest stillness. A gray SUV pulled up. Emily Reed and a vet tech, Noah Bennett, jumped out, carrying gear. They moved with quiet precision. Emily lifted her eyes to Jack and spoke low. Stay back. Let us approach. Jack nodded and stepped aside. Emily approached slowly, her posture calm, her voice a steady murmur meant for the lynx as much as for her partner. The mother's ears flicked, her body tense, but she stayed. Noah slid a carrier forward, and together they assessed the cub without fully lifting it. Emily's words were clipped but clear. Hypothermia, dehydration, shallow respiration. Jack clenched his fists, helpless as they worked. Emily swaddled the cub in a thermal blanket, hands steady, while Noah adjusted a small portable heater. The cub let out a thin rasp of air but didn't resist. The mother lynx leaned forward, nose twitching, but still she did not strike. Her gaze flicked between her cub and the humans, weighing, measuring. When the cub was secured, Emily signaled. Noah closed the carrier gently, careful not to slam or jar it. They lifted it into their vehicle, every movement slow, deliberate. Jack's throat was dry. He asked if it would make it. Emily met his eyes for a brief moment, her expression unreadable. We're going to do everything we can. They loaded up, the SUV door closing with a muffled thud. As the engine started, Jack noticed movement out of the corner of his eye. The mother lynx had risen and padded to the edge of the clearing. She didn't lunge. She didn't vanish into the trees. Instead, as the SUV rolled down the dirt track, she moved alongside it, weaving through the tree line. Not attacking, just following. Jack stood rooted to the porch, heart heavy, watching until both the vehicle and the lynx disappeared into the thick green wall of forest. Inside the SUV, the carrier was wedged between Emily and Noah, a thermal blanket tucked tight around the cub's trembling body. The air was sharp with the scent of antiseptic wipes and warm plastic. Noah held a small portable oxygen unit, its tubing fitted gently near the cub's nose. A faint hiss filled the car. The lynx's sides rose and fell unevenly, each breath rattling in its chest. Emily leaned closer, her voice low and steady. He's cold to the core. We need to raise his temperature slowly, not all at once. She slid her hand inside the carrier, checking the bottles Jack had heated. Still warm, but cooling fast. She swapped them with fresh ones from a portable heater she had brought. Noah uncapped a vial, soaked a swab, and touched the cub's lips with a glucose saline solution. The cub's tongue flicked weakly, then again, as if his body remembered what survival demanded. Noah glanced at Emily. Response is minimal, but it's there. Emily nodded, her eyes fixed forward. Just keep him stable until Parker sees him. Jack sat in the passenger seat, knuckles white against his knees. Every sound in the carrier felt like thunder. He wanted to say something, anything, but his throat burned. Emily broke the silence. "Jack, you did the right thing. You called us, and you kept your distance. That's why he still has a chance." Jack swallowed hard and turned to the window, the trees sliding by like shadows. At the clinic, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as they rushed through double doors. Dr. Parker, a lean man with tired eyes, met them in the hallway. He didn't waste time. "Temp," Emily answered, dangerously low, but climbing. "Dehydration severe. Respiration shallow." Parker gestured toward the treatment room. "Let's move." The cub was transferred onto a padded table under a heat lamp. Wires, tubing, the soft beep of monitors filled the space. Parker slid a catheter with practiced hands, attaching fluids. His tone was clipped. "Broad-spectrum antibiotics. Likely inhalation damage from smoke. Maybe early pneumonia. Keep him in the incubator, oxygen enriched." Jack hovered in the doorway, his body tense with useless energy. Emily turned, her tone firmer now. "Jack, you can't stay here. If the mother smells too much of you, she might reject him later. Go home. Let us work." Jack hesitated, his heart rebelling. But Parker didn't even look up as he added, "She's right. Best thing you can do is step back." Jack's throat ached as he nodded. He stepped into the night, the sterile hum of the clinic fading behind him. The drive home felt longer than it should. His cabin was dark when he pulled in, the forest pressing close, silent. He carried a metal bowl to the porch, filled it with fresh water, and set it near the spot where the cub had lain that morning. He didn't call out. He didn't wait. He just left it there. Hours later, long past midnight, Jack sat at his kitchen table staring at the silent phone. A soft ping from the security camera broke the stillness. He opened the feed. On the screen, the mother lynx appeared out of the tree line. She moved silently across the porch, paused at the bowl, then lowered herself onto the boards. She curled in the same spot her cub had been, her eyes scanning the darkness. She stayed there, unmoving, a lone figure holding her vigil as the night dragged on. The days that followed stretched like wire pulled too tight. Jack woke each morning to the same silence, his eyes darting to the porch before he even poured his first cup of coffee. The metal bowl of water remained untouched for hours, then would be half empty by nightfall. Some nights the camera caught her. The mother lynx moved like a shadow, pacing, lying down, waiting. Jack never stepped outside while she was there. He knew better. At the clinic, Emily sent short updates by phone. Her voice carried both fatigue and control. "Temperature is steady now. Breathing deeper." He even lifted his head for a moment today. Jack clung to every word, replaying them like prayers. When he asked if he could see the cub, Emily's tone sharpened. "No visits. Any scent of you could tip the balance." Jack swallowed his frustration and agreed. But the waiting gnawed at him. He spent hours in his workshop, tools idle in his hands, mind elsewhere. Every creak of the forest outside made him glance toward the porch. He didn't want to admit it, but the sight of the mother resting in the very spot her cub had lain was a weight on his chest he couldn't shake. By the third day, the silence was broken not by the lynx, but by a knock. His neighbor, Carl, stood at the fence line, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. "Word travels fast in a town this small. Heard you've got a lynx hanging around," he said flatly. Jack didn't answer at first, and Carl pushed on. "That's dangerous. You need to call in the rangers before someone gets hurt." Jack felt his jaw tighten. "She's not attacking anyone, Carl. She's waiting." Carl shook his head. "Waiting or not, predators don't belong on porches. You're asking for trouble." Jack stepped closer, his voice low but firm. "I'm not feeding her. I'm not luring her here. This ends when her cub is strong enough. It's temporary." Carl's frown deepened, but he turned away muttering, "You'll regret this if it goes wrong." That night, Jack sat in darkness, the neighbor's words grinding at him. The camera pinged again. He pulled it up on his phone and saw her. The mother, lying flat on the boards, her eyes open and alert. She wasn't leaving. She wasn't forgetting. She was holding her vigil. Another day passed, and Emily's call came later than usual. Jack's heart nearly split when he finally heard her voice. "He's stable. Stronger than we expected. Enough that we can start planning." Jack's breath caught. "Planning?" Emily's voice softened, but carried weight. "If the mother shows again, we'll try a controlled return. We do it carefully, with distance. No sudden moves, no interference." Jack stood in the kitchen, phone pressed to his ear, staring out at the edge of the forest. The porch lay empty, but he knew it was only a matter of time before golden eyes appeared again. His pulse quickened. The waiting wasn't over. It was only shifting into something heavier. Evening settled over the forest with a heavy stillness, the kind that made every sound stretch longer than it should. The breeze had died down, and even the birds had gone quiet, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Jack's cabin stood quiet and subdued, lights dimmed to keep the setting as natural as possible, while the small team prepared the porch for what might be the riskiest step yet. Emily moved with deliberate precision, sliding a clean towel into the bottom of the transport crate. She sprinkled a thin layer of soil and pine needles over it, carefully masking the human scent. Noah followed close behind, pressing branches against the crate's exterior, brushing away every hint of plastic or soap. They knew that even the faintest trace of humanity could tip the scales against them. Jack stood a few feet back, nerves raw and muscles tight. His hands flexed at his sides as though desperate to do something, anything, to help. But Emily had already warned him. Too much of your scent could throw this off. Just stay still when the time comes. Her words lingered in his mind, and though every instinct screamed for action, he obeyed, locking his twitching fingers against his thighs. The weight of responsibility pressed down harder than the mountain air around them. Inside the crate, the cub stirred, a faint whimper breaking the silence. His breaths were steadier now compared to those early desperate hours, but his small body remained fragile, each movement slow and deliberate. Emily crouched low, her expression steady, and eased the crate door open just enough to leave a narrow gap. The blanket was pulled high, shielding most of the cub's body, ensuring he wouldn't bolt too soon. She glanced at Jack, her whisper softer than the wind. Now we wait. They retreated together, slipping into the deep shadow of the cabin's wall. The air carried the sharp smell of resin, damp wood, and fading heat from the sun-warmed boards. Time dragged painfully. Nothing moved. The forest stretched out in silence, the fading light painting the trees in long, black silhouettes. Jack's chest felt tight, his breath shallow, every passing second like an iron weight pressing down on him. Then, movement. Out beyond the tree line, a shape materialized from the dusk, low, deliberate, and silent. The mother lynx stepped carefully into the clearing, her sleek body taut with caution. Her fur caught the dim orange glow of the last light, making her seem both ghostly and solid all at once. Her ears flicked forward, nostrils flaring to test the air. She froze halfway, her golden eyes locking on the porch, catching the day's final rays like molten metal. Jack held his breath, his heart hammering painfully. His muscles screamed to move, to step closer, but he forced himself to remain rooted, the pounding of his pulse echoing in his ears. The lynx inched forward with painstaking care, each paw pressing silently against the earth. She paused again near the first step of the porch, her chest rising and falling in sharp, shallow bursts of air. Jack could see the tension rippling beneath her fur, the hesitation between fight, flight, and trust. Emily, crouched beside Noah, raised one hand in a small, deliberate motion, signaling him to stay frozen. Inside the crate, the cub shifted once more, his tiny claws scratching softly against the towel. The faint noise pierced the silence. A fragile squeak broke free, not quite a mew, not quite a cry, but enough to shatter the balance. The mother's ears snapped forward violently, her head whipping toward the sound. She froze, muscles coiled like springs, every nerve in her body primed to flee. Jack's breath caught painfully in his chest, the fear of failure tightening every bone in his body. He imagined her bolting back into the shadows, abandoning this fragile reunion. But she didn't. Instead, the lynx lowered her head, pulling in a long breath, her body trembling with restrained energy. She stepped forward cautiously, claws gripping the old porch boards. One paw touched the wood, then another. The ancient planks groaned softly beneath her weight, carrying the sound into the tense night. Jack's stomach tightened until he thought he might collapse. The distance between predator and man had shrunk to the width of a breath, a fragile thread stretched between them. The cub whimpered louder this time, a soft cry that rose into the stillness and hung there. The mother's throat vibrated with a low, rolling sound, a noise older than language itself. It wasn't a growl, and it wasn't a hiss. It was something deeper, more resonant, the raw call of a mother reaching for her young. The sound hummed through the boards beneath Jack's feet, straight into his bones, shaking something deep inside him. He had never heard anything like it, and yet he knew exactly what it was. From within the crate came an answer, fragile but clear, a faint rasping mew, thin but determined. The sound landed like a stone in the air between them, stitching the silence together with threads of hope and fear all at once. Jack's hands clenched into fists, his chest burning as he fought back the urge to cry out. His eyes stung with unshed tears. This was the line they had been waiting for, the razor's edge between success and disaster. The moment when trust, fear, and survival balanced on the edge of the porch, every life caught in the silence of a mother's call and a cub's desperate reply. The porch seemed to hold its breath, every creak and shadow alive with tension. The mother lynx lowered her head toward the crate, her whiskers brushing the edge of the door as though testing whether this human-made barrier could truly contain her cub. She sniffed once, twice, each breath deliberate, and then pressed her nose closer to the gap. Inside, the cub stirred, tiny paws dragging his frail body forward with a determination that cut straight into Jack's chest. A thin cry slipped out, fragile but filled with longing, and the mother answered with a deep rumble. The sound vibrated through the wooden boards beneath their feet, a primal language that needed no translation. Emily's hand hovered near the latch, her knuckles white. "Not yet," she whispered to Noah, barely more than a breath. Her eyes locked on the lynx with unyielding focus. They waited, seconds stretching into eternity. The cub, driven by the unmistakable call, pushed forward again, his muzzle poking through the opening. The mother lowered her head, touching him gently, her nose tracing the contours of his small face. Warm air passed over his damp fur, and for the first time in days, he seemed to relax. She didn't recoil. She only lingered, inhaling deeply, pulling in the scent of her young buried beneath the faint traces of antiseptic and human hands. The cub mewed again, louder now, and pawed against the tiny barrier as if begging to be released. The mother's body trembled, her muscles quivering, tail flicking once in agitation. Emily exhaled softly, a decision forming in her eyes. Now, with utmost care, she eased the latch open, pulling the door back inch by inch, until nothing separated mother and child. The cub stumbled forward, weak yet resolute, his paws slipping against the blanket, but his spirit unbroken. The mother bent low, nudging him with her nose, guiding him closer. Then, with one smooth and instinctive motion, she took him gently by the scruff, lifting him into the air. His small body dangled helplessly, legs twitching, but there was no fear, only the return to something familiar. Jack's throat tightened painfully as he watched. The scene etched itself into his mind like a memory carved in stone. For a heartbeat, time stood still. The lynx turned her head slightly, golden eyes reflecting the faint light spilling from the cabin window. She looked at the humans, Emily crouched and unmoving, Noah frozen at her side, Jack half hidden in the shadow of the doorway. No growl, no snarl, no instinctive flight. Just that stare, heavy with something Jack could only describe as acknowledgement. In that silent exchange lay gratitude, recognition, and the fragile trust that had allowed this moment to exist at all. Then, with the grace of the wilderness itself, she turned. Silent as falling snow, she stepped from the porch, her body gliding toward the dark embrace of the forest. The cub swayed gently from her jaws, safe in the only way nature allowed. In moments, both were swallowed by the shadows, their forms blending into the endless wall of trees. The night air seemed to collapse in on itself, silence rushing back heavier than before. Jack exhaled, his knees trembling with the release of tension. Emily slowly rose, lifting a hand to signal patience. They stood still for long minutes more, straining their ears, until even the faintest rustle of branches disappeared. At last, Emily gave a small nod. "That's it," she said softly. "He's back where he belongs." Days stretched into a quiet rhythm, until Jack checked one of the trail cameras set near a winding game path. He slid the card into the reader, breath held tight, and there it was, the image he had longed for. The mother lynx moved with steady strength, her body sleek and sure, the cub trotting clumsily at her side. His legs no longer wobbled. His body held higher, each step steadier. They were together, alive, and moving deeper into the wild. Jack stared at the photo until his vision blurred, relief spreading through him like warmth. That evening, he returned to his porch. The metal bowl of water still sat near the step, a relic of desperate days. He picked it up slowly, carried it inside, and set it down empty on the kitchen counter. Outside, the porch boards looked bare without it, but the emptiness no longer hurt. The silence that settled there was not heavy or suffocating. It was peace, the kind born only from knowing when to intervene, when to care, and when to step aside, leaving the wild to remain wild. For Jack, it was an ending, but also the kind of ending that made the forest feel whole again.